Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for clicking. It means a lot that you guys keep clicking. If you guys keep clicking, I'll keep making. And today, I talked yesterday about the episode, specifically what went on, and I did kind of touch on why I don't like it. I also touched on it in my live show post the game happening. But I think it's time to make a video and sit down and really explain my problems, because some people were really happy with this premiere. They love this. And I'm not one of those people. I have my flaws with it, and I think they're pretty reasonable. So this video is just why I am so disappointed with this premiere as an episode of Survivor, with or without the crazy circumstances surrounding this season, right? The insane expectations going in and the insane importance of this season. Even just in a vacuum, I think that this first episode was horrible, but especially with the amount of confidence that we need to have in Survivor going forward. I mean, this is just horrible. As always, if you haven't already, like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff, because it's free, it's easy, and it really helps the channel out. All right, so where to start? I mean, I kind of already talked about the 26 days, so I feel like we won't start there. Let's just start with the episode. So as we go on, first of all, that marooning was so boring. I mean, the first challenge there is pretty cookie cutter, very similar to the first challenge from last season. Very similar vibe as well, with Jeff kind of bantering with the players. Again, it felt so much like last season. On top of that, the second challenge that we see is literally a copy and paste of the challenge from last season in the premiere. Then on top of that, them redoing the sweat and savvy thing, although I think it has some merit and it is a little bit cool, I think maybe making some tweaks to it, changing the type of way to do it. So maybe not sweat and savvy, but different choices. You know, I feel like them just making this an every season thing is kind of boring and lazy of them. And then on top of that, after this, we get the formation of the two female alliances on both the yellow and blue tribes. Now, obviously, the yellow tribes didn't really work out that well, as we saw Mariah go home, which really was the only saving grace from this premiere for me personally. But I think it's still just not good. I don't understand who can look at that and say, wow, that's really good for Survivor, right? All female alliances targeting a specific gender or race, to me, just are never a good thing. And I think the best example, the best argument you can make that you cannot argue against is, for an example, when you start to make alliances based off race, let's say, you make a all black alliance who targets white players or just targets players who aren't black. How are you going to avoid a all white alliance doing the exact opposite? And for those who are gonna say, oh well, that's never gonna happen, right? It wouldn't be fair, but it would. I mean, if you're going to allow one race to do it, it's the definition of equality. You have to let the other one do it. It's the most basic way of computing as to whether or not something is fair. You just switch it around on yourself, and this does not work the other way. That sounds horrible, to have an all-white alliance targeting black players. So why is it okay the other way around? Why is it okay for a women's alliance to pick off all the men, but if the men band together and make an anti-women's alliance, that's somehow sexist and misogynist, and people on Twitter are calling it a threat to the game? I don't know. To me, it's very silly and hypocritical, really. And really, after these alliances are set into place is where we get my least favorite part of it. The part that's kind of grown on me. At first, everyone was complaining and I didn't really understand. I was like, it's whatever, who cares? There's bigger problems right here. The guys is a bigger problem. Dre is a bigger problem. But now this is starting to really grow on me as a serious issue. And that is these forced sob stories. I understand that the sob stories themselves have merit to being in the show. But the idea for the first 39, or I guess 40 seasons, was that a player would tell you the story in a natural way later on in the game if it was important enough, right? If a player gets far, he'll tell you it once you hit the merge or when it becomes relevant to the game. For an example, in 41, really the only good sob story was Danny's at the final, what, 6? It came up naturally. It happened to be on that day that him and his dad had, you know, their beef or whatever, and he had brought it up, and it came out very naturally. The rest of them were all squeezed into a premiere episode where you don't really remember half of them. I mean, try and think of the sob stories. How many of them can you really think of by heart? All of the details. And that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying not to have them. I'm just saying that when you keep them that abundant in such a short amount of time, they lose their value. And that really defeats the purpose of even having them in the first place, to me personally. On top of that, I think some of them are just kind of silly. But I think overall the issue is definitely with the abundance of them and the way that they're put into the show in such an artificial way. We then get the return of something that I really still have yet to make my mind up over whether I think it's a actively bad thing or just a mediocre thing. But we get the return of Shitwheel Island, aka Risk Your Vote or Keep Your Vote Island, because it seems that every time we go, that's the only twist that they can think of, which I think is kind of sad. I'm not gonna lie. It gets kind of boring after a while, and I kind of hate the concept in general, because in the pre-merge, your vote is so important. When you don't really know people, your bonds aren't as big, the numbers are smaller, especially in 3 tribe seasons. So your vote is so important. To lose that is to lose such a giant element of the strategy during that pre-merge part of the game. And so I think the idea of taking away votes, it may work for a tribal like the Jenny Blindside last season, but it's made so many tribals very, very boring to watch, that we don't think about. And so I think it's not really a good concept in general. But then on top of that, this season's new version of that concept is so broken to me. It's more based on chance, where if 2 people risk their vote, then they draw out of a bag. But if 3 people do, then they draw out of a different bag, and then in that bag, it's 2 random. It's just so random. It's not based off skill. At least the last one, you can kind of bait someone into not risking, and then you risk, and as long as you made the choice that you wanted to make and that made sense for the situation, it works out. But for this, it's so random and kind of just not in place. To me, it doesn't really make much sense. It took me a second to get it, so I can't imagine a casual viewer. I think it just kind of breaks the concept in. It kind of ruins what was a decent twist, still kind of but definitely decent, into a twist that's just so confusing and convoluted, really. And lastly, I have to point out the editing, right? Because I think this cast isn't the worst cast ever. I know there's some people who really, really think it's like the worst cast ever. I don't think it is, despite my clickbait thumbnails, but I don't actually think it's the worst cast ever. I think it has some cool characters, and I think people like Cody and Sammy are some of the best casting that I've seen. And I think it's kind of a pattern for this new era, right? You get your Shans and your Highs and your Dreas and your Jonathans, and then you get everybody else. I don't understand. I guess 42's supplemental characters were a little bit better, but like I feel like this season's best comparison right now is 41. And with 41, you have Shan, Ricard, Deshawn. I guess Evie's the next best. You know what I mean? It's just a bunch of nobodies with amazing casting. It's shines of greatness, and like it's not Russell Hantz great or Boston Rob great, but it's shines of greatness, and then it's just the slums of casting. And I think that inactivity as far as the consistency in the casting is the biggest disappointment from me. On top of that, I think the editing is what's really the worst part of that, because again, like I said, I don't think the casting is horrible. The editing is what's bad, because besides Cody and Sammy, I mean, you could add Ellie into there, but it was less about her and more about the fact that she was in control of her tribe. So there you go. Cody, Sammy, Ellie. Everybody else got almost nothing. I understand, I'm sure the stats don't say that, but that's how it felt as a viewer. And it should never really feel that way to me. That doesn't really feel right to me. And so I think that's also a big issue. But what do you think? Do I have it all wrong? Is this cast the best cast ever? Are you kind of in the middle? Is it just a meh cast? Or do you agree with me and you think that this season is absolutely embarrassing? Let me know down below in the comments. As always, none of this happens without you guys. Without you guys, I'm Mr. Weird Guy spinning a weird microphone. So as always, thank you. And if that's it, I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.